Hello and many blessings, beloved, my beloved people. Check this out. So today I am going to kind of show you guys how I intuitively learn. So, and part of my church and whatnot is also being transparent about who I am as a person, which is, some of the things that I am interested in, which happen to be philosophy, because philosophy got me to this point in my life. I would not be here if not for philosophy. So I deeply understand the pain of these two men. I vaguely know of each of them. I have seen a little bit of social media stir here and there, so I'm interested to kind of hear them firsthand. That's how I try to get my information, to learn intuitively. I try to get my information as firsthand as possible, and question everything. So it looks like this debate's pretty long, so I'm still learning how to do this, so bear with me. I'll try to pause it and keep it, broken up or something. I don't know. I'll try to figure it out and make sure it's not a pain to watch. But ultimately, this is kind of how I intuitively learn. So I'm going to watch the debate to hear from them firsthand, and I'll just take notes here, what he says about it. Or at least, the parts that resonate with me, because part of my intuitive learning is investigating only the things that resonate with me, right? I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but believe me, I've exercised every other option in life, and I failed at every other option in life. So believe me when I tell you, this has been the only thing that's really worked for me. Because I've fought it my entire life. I fought my intuition. That's why I can understand it so much now, because I'm used to fighting it. I'm used to fighting my intuition. So just, I know you'll understand it more as we go, I think. My point of view, I think, just as you kind of absorb everything that I am. So ultimately, the whole philosophy thing is something I want to participate in at one point in time in my life when I'm as smart as these guys. If I ever get that smart, I doubt it. I'm lazy, but let's dig in. And so I got my spreadsheet up, got the YouTube pulled up here. I have no idea who I should go with. So I like this picture, so I'm gonna go with this picture. See, that's how dumb. I'm making dumb decisions, but I'm doing it. I'm just listening to my intuition while I'm making these dumb decisions. All right, so I like stars. I'm an idiot, so I'm gonna watch this video. And I like to get in the habit of always trying to subscribe as soon as I watch something that someone's taken the time to produce. It's like they've taken the time to do this for someone else, so I'll support it until it doesn't agree with me, right? I'll accept it until it no longer serves me, and since this serves me, I show my appreciation by subscribing to their channel. That's all I can do. I'm broke. I got nothing else to do. So give them a view, and we'll dig into this and see how this goes. I don't have any sound. Oh, I bet it's something with my sound set up. I wonder if... I've been messing with my sounds for a while. I'm messing with stuff. I wonder if I can't listen. Or is this even playing? My dumb decision, my dumb intuition decision. Look at that.
The Academy.
Oh.
Just as this debate, we hope.
All right. Just as I doubt myself. Let's see. That's funny though. Now I gotta find the part where it actually starts, because I'm an idiot. Alright. Ooh, happiness. This is what they're talking about. Cool. Let's see. I'll pause it right here. Happiness, just a quick, my personal point of view of happiness. You know, I think it looks like it, you know, it's happiness, capitalism versus Marxism, and I think they're both missing the point to what happiness is. And when you attach a, you know, economic structure to happiness, or try to apply economic structure to happiness, it's you know, you have to apply it to the proper degree of your life, right? You know, if you're going to live in a capitalist system, be a full capitalist, right? Be it to the fullest, and understand that you are just capital, you know? You're just something to make more money with, right? And you're going to and you're gonna do it one way or the other, right? You're going to do it one way or the other, so you might as well find the best way to do it that's, you know, that makes you happy and fulfills you deeply. And, you know, then you'll find happiness in a capitalist system, but you have to become the capital, you know. And then once you become the capital, you know, you define your own value, I think. So, I mean, nobody really knows what's going on. Marxism, I mean, same thing, right? If you want to be happy in a Marxist system, be, you know, fully Marxist. You're both going to end up doing the same thing, which is trading your time for something else, right? To some degree. And it's unfortunate, you know. I think the argument might be that Marxism, since it's more of a social built construct, I don't know anything about politics, but my understanding is maybe, you know, because it would give everyone a foot up, right? A leg up in the world, right? And raising that mean would be a good thing for everyone, right? But, you know, then there comes the problem of you still have corruption and stuff like that. So, you know, a Marxist system would have to be led by systems and not people, right? So that's where you have to understand that, you know, that's the only way it's going to work, is if you develop systems that work for everyone, and it's not toyed with by people. And then capitalism, on the other hand, you know, once you declare your value and decide to create your own worth and become the capital, you know, you end up trading your time for that passion. You know, is, I want to fix this, or I want to solve this problem, or I want to build this thing to help this person. You know, you have the idea. The idea is the capital, and it's how you capitalize on the idea. You know, ultimately to find happiness in a capitalist system, which, I mean, I'm happy and I'm in a capitalist system, but I don't have any capital, so it doesn't make any sense. So I don't know. I'm probably way off. I'm probably wrong, or maybe we're not really living in a capitalist system, or maybe the capital that I consider myself is beyond measure. So I don't know. Maybe I'm that dumb. Maybe I'm that dumb. I think of myself that much. Well, anything's better than what I used to think about myself, so that's my view of happiness.
Jordan Peterson.
Ooh, he's got a little crowd. Got a little crowd with him. Make philosophy fun again. I love how he does look like a raccoon. I love that other guy. I love this guy already. He's so relaxed. That's my style.
Just a few words of introduction. There can be few things, I think, now more urgent and necessary in an age of reactionary.
Has no one taken a public speaking class ever?
Civil discourse.
Go take a
and
stand-up
real
class.
thinking about hard questions. The very premise
I
of
don't know, I
tonight's
just don't like
event
listening to this guy. I don't
is
like
that we
listening
all
to this guy.
participate
Sounds like he's just reading
the
off
life
cards.
of thought,
I like to listen to people when they're talking
not
from their
merely
brain.
opinion or prejudice.
Sounds
but
like
the
he's
realm
reading
of
off cards.
truth.
I mean, he might have wrote it. Who knows?
Access through evidence and argument.
I mean, it sounds like if he believed what he was
These
saying, he would say it with a little more
towering
passion.
figures of different disciplines and
That's my
domains
opinion.
share more than a commitment to thinking itself. They are both highly attuned to ideology and the mechanisms of power, and yet they are not principally political thinkers. They are both concerned with more fundamental matters, meaning,
That's why I'm
truth,
attracted to this.
freedom.
Yep, that's why
So
I
it seems
like
to me
it.
likely
That's
we
where
will see
I got
tonight not
philosophy.
only deep differences, but also surprising agreement on deep questions.
I love it. I'm
Dr.
excited
Slavoj
already.
Zizek is a philosopher.
Who?
He has not one but 2 doctoral degrees.
Nice.
One in philosophy.
He's like, yeah, it's just something I had to do. It's like, please don't applaud that. Please don't applaud
One
that
in
hard
philosophy
work.
from the University of Ljubljana.
Don't go to school, guys.
And a second in psychoanalysis from
It's
University.
like, hold your applause. I got something for you.
Let's hear it for psychoanalysis.
I like it.
From the
Educated people,
University
see?
of Paris 8. He is now a professor at the Institute of Sociology and Philosophy at the University of Ljubljana and
Man,
the director of the Birkbeck Institute for the Humanities at the University of London.
it'd be so cool to do
He has
something like
published
that.
more than 36 books, many on the most seminal philosophers of the 19th and 20th centuries. He is a dazzling theorist with extraordinary range. A global figure for decades, he turns again and again with dialectical power.
I wish he had
to
more
radical
delivery
questions,
skills. Oh, this would be so much more entertaining.
subjectivity, and art.
Yeah. Oh, man. I know that feeling. I know that feeling.
Dr. Jordan Peterson is an academic and clinical.
The cool guy. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, the cool guy versus the nerd. Oh no, I'm
An
a
academic
nerd.
and clinical psychologist.
I'm gonna get beat up
His
by the cool
doctorate was
kids
awarded by
again.
Yale University, and he was subsequently we got some McGill graduates.
Well, at
out
least
here.
he embodies the
He was
capitalist
subsequently
ideal
professor
of the
psychology
suit.
at Harvard University,
Looks a nice
and
suit.
then the University of Toronto,
Nice suit.
where he is
I like
today.
fashion. I design my own clothes when I can. It's really fun.
The author of 2 books and well over 100 academic articles, Dr. Peterson's intellectual roots likewise lie in the 19th and early 20th centuries, where his reading of Nietzsche, Dostoyevsky,
Nietzsche.
and above all, Carl Jung,
Ooh,
inform his
some
interpretation
of that.
ancient
Jung.
myths of 20th century
I
totalitarianism,
read a lot of Jung.
and especially his
Carl.
endeavor to counter
Jung.
contemporary
C.G.
nihilism.
Jung.
His 12 Rules for Life is a global bestseller, and his lectures and
I wish I could
podcasts
write a book,
are
man.
followed by millions around the world.
Every time I try to write a book, it's just, ugh. Oh, I wish I could write a book.
Both Dr.
Every time I
Zizek
try,
and Peterson
I'll try again eventually.
transcend their titles, their disciplines, and the academy. Just as this debate, we hope, will transcend purely economic questions by situating those in the frame of happiness, of human flourishing itself. We're in for quite a night. A quick word
Whoops. I'm over here. No.
to make a substantial opening statement. to lay out an argument. Dr. Peterson first, followed by Dr. Zizek. Each will then have, in the same order, 10 minutes to reply. I will then moderate 45 minutes or so.
If I'm ever gonna do a debate, I've got to learn to talk for less than 10 minutes.
Both here in Toronto and online.
That's gonna be tough.
With that, let's get underway. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jordan Peterson for the first opening statement.
I wonder if I can block these things here.
Well, thank you for that insanely enthusiastic welcome for the entire event and also for being here. I have to tell you first that this event, and I suppose my life in some sense,
I like
hit
the way
a
he talks.
new milestone that I was just made aware of by a stagehand today backstage, who informed me that last week the tickets for this event were being scalped online at a higher price than the tickets for the Leafs playoff games.
Oh snap! He's a comedian too. Check this guy out. Maybe I can open for him one day. He's a comedian now.
All right. So
I did it backwards. I was a comedian, then a philosopher.
I familiarized myself to the degree that it was possible with Slavoj Zizek's work, and that wasn't that possible because he has a lot of work and he's a very original thinker, and this debate was put together in relatively short order. And what I did instead was return to what I regarded as the original cause of all the trouble, let's say, which was the Communist Manifesto. And what I attempted to do, because that's Marx, and we're here to talk about Marxism, let's say, and what I tried to do was read it. And to read something, you don't just follow the words and follow the meaning, but you take apart the sentences and you ask yourself at this level of phrase and at the level of sentence and at the level of paragraph, is this true? Are there counter arguments that can be put forward that are credible?
That's how I do it.
Solid thinking.
That's how I do it, and I'm just trying to make my thinking more solid.
I'm not trying to be flippant here, that I have rarely read a tract. Now, I read it when I was 18. It was a long time ago. That's
he said
years ago. But I've rarely read a tract that made as many errors per sentence, conceptual errors per sentence, as the Communist Manifesto.
Uh-oh, snap.
A miraculous reread.
Got him.
It was interesting to think about.
See, that's when you know when you lose in the argument. When you lose in the argument, you got to attack the grammar. Isn't that a meme? Isn't that a meme already? Before this,
the Communist Manifesto was a call for revolution.
There's a meme that said, if you got to attack the person's grammar, you probably lose in the argument. So I hope that's not foreshadowing. I hate foreshadowing in real life.
Grappled with one fundamental,
takes the
truth, which is that
takes the
almost all
surprise
ideas
out
are
of it.
wrong. And so if you and it doesn't matter if they're your ideas or someone else's ideas, they're probably wrong. And even if they strike you with the force of brilliance, your job is to assume, first of all, that they're probably wrong, and then to assault them with everything you have in your arsenal and see if they can survive. And what struck me about the Communist Manifesto was it was akin to something Jung said about typical thinking, and this was the thinking of people who weren't trained to think. He said that the typical thinker has a thought. It appears to them
I'm a typical
like
thinker.
An object might appear in a room.
I think.
The thought appears, and then they just accept it as true. They don't go the second step, which is to think about the
no, I do the second step.
And that's the real essence of critical thinking. So
I'm a critical thinker! Oh, what?
Read a text and think about it critically, not to destroy the utility of the text, but to separate the wheat from the chaff. And so what I'm
learning so much about myself. I'm a critical thinker.
The wheat from the chaff.
Not bad.
And I'm afraid I found
you only need to do two things to critical think. Have an idea and think. Oh, man.
Hopefully, relatively short order. So I'm going to outline 10 of the fundamental axioms of the Communist Manifesto. And so these are truths that are basically held as self-evident by the authors. And those that are presented in some sense as unquestioned, and I'm going to question them and tell you why I think they're
Why?
unreliable.
Uh-oh,
Now, we should remember that
unreliable.
this tract was actually written 170 years ago. That's a long time ago. And we have learned a fair bit from since
Fair
then about
point.
human nature, about
Fair
society,
point.
about politics, about economics.
To
There's lots of mysteries left to be unsolved, but left to be solved.
resist
but we are slightly
ourself
wiser,
is
I
to
presume, than we were at one point. And
resist
so
all
you
of
can
it.
forgive the authors to some degree for what
So
they didn't
growth
know.
is part
but
of
that doesn't matter,
understanding.
given that the essence of this doctrine is still held as sacrosanct by a large proportion of academics.
Most of these is just words
Probably
he's saying.
Are among the most
Most of it's random. Like, I mean, there's some,
guilty of
yeah,
that particular.
there's a couple of things
sin.
in there, but he's
So,
mostly just
here's
alluding to
proposition
things.
number
And
one.
now we're talking.
History is to be viewed primarily as
You
an
can hear him
economic
talking
class
when the
struggle.
change of his tone.
All right, so let's think about that for a minute. First of all, the proposition there is that history is primarily to be viewed through an economic lens, and I think that's a debatable proposition because there are many other motivations that drive human beings than economics, and those have to be taken into account, especially
agree
that
to
drive
that.
people other than economic competition, like economic cooperation, for example. And so that's a problem.
Oh,
The other problem is
also
that
give
it's
him a
actually
like.
not nearly a pessimistic enough description of the actual problem, because history, this is to give the devil his due. The idea that one of the driving forces between history is hierarchical struggle is absolutely true. But the idea that that's actually history is not true, because it's deeper than history. It's biology itself, because organisms of all sorts organize themselves into hierarchies. And one of the problems with hierarchies is that they tend to arrange themselves into a winner-take-all situation. And so, and that is implicit in some sense in Marx's thinking, because of course Marx believed that in a capitalist society, capital would accumulate in the hands of fewer and fewer people. And that actually is in
I don't know if I'm
keeping
going to be
with the
pausing
nature
it and
of
stuff. It
hierarchical
seems like a lot of
organizations.
work. I'm sorry.
Now, the
You're gonna have to
problem
watch
with
the whole
that
thing like I
isn't
did.
so much the fact of so there's accuracy in the accusation that is
And so forget the
eternal
notes.
form of
Let's just watch it and talk
motivation for
about it.
struggle, but it's an
Notes are for
underestimation of the
these kind of
seriousness
guys.
the
I'm not these
problem,
kind of
because
guys.
it attributes it to the structure of human societies rather than the deeper reality of the existence of hierarchical structures per se, which, as they also characterize the animal kingdom to a large degree, are clearly not only human constructions. And the idea that there's hierarchical competition among human beings, there's evidence for that that goes back at least to the Paleolithic times. And so that's the next problem. It's that, well, this ancient problem of hierarchical structure is clearly not attributable to capitalism, because it existed long in human history before capitalism existed, and then it predated human history itself. So the question then arises, why would you necessarily, at least implicitly, link the class struggle with capitalism, given that it's a far deeper problem? And now, it's also, you've got to understand that this is a deeper problem for people on the left, not just for people on the right. It is the case that hierarchical structures dispossess those
I don't
people
think-
who are
I
at the
think he's
bottom,
talking
those
over
creatures
people.
who are at the bottom, speaking, say, of animals.
Except
those
for the
people
one
who are at
who's
the bottom,
listening,
and
I
that
guess.
is a fundamental existential problem. But the other thing that Marx didn't seem to take into account is that there are far more reasons that human beings struggle than their economic class struggle, even if you build the hierarchical idea into
And I
that. which is
think
more
the I'm trying to simplify it in my head, right? But ultimately, I think what he's saying is that you can't attribute life's struggle to capitalism, essentially. You just can't, right? And I'm sure he'll get to why. But I think he's trying to just say, you just can't attribute it because it didn't exist. The truths that we are seeking and that we are debating existed before these systems, right? And these systems, probably in theory, somebody was happy when they made them. So we're, but that's the thing. They're experiments. I think that's the thing that people have to understand is we have to experiment to find the better way to do it. I don't know what I'm doing with my life other than I want to be I just want to help people, and help them find the spiritual center that I did. And that gave me happiness, confidence that I needed to rely on my personal skills to go out and start doing something with my life instead of, not participating in life. All right. And that goes back to my theory on happiness, which is ultimately, I got to break mine down. Mine's pretty verbose. So let's get back to this.
More super comprehensive way of thinking about it. Human beings struggle with themselves, with the malevolence that's inside themselves, with the evil that they're capable of doing, with the spiritual and psychological warfare that goes on within them. And we're also actually always at odds with nature. And this never seems to show up in Marx. And it doesn't show up in Marxism in general. It's as if nature doesn't exist. The primary conflict, as far as I'm concerned, or a primary conflict that human beings engage in, is the struggle for life in a cruel and harsh natural world. Okay. And it's as if that doesn't exist in the Marxist domain. If human beings have a problem, it's because there's a class struggle that's essentially economic. It's like, no, human beings have problems because we come into
life is hard,
starving and lonesome.
Right.
We have to solve that problem continually.
We have to rely on our parents,
at least in part, to ameliorate that, as well as to,
I agree,
well, upon occasion, exacerbate it. And so there's also very little understanding in the Communist Manifesto that any of the, like, say, hierarchical organizations that human beings have put together might have a positive element. And that's an absolute catastrophe, because hierarchical structures are actually necessary to solve complicated social problems. We have to organize ourselves in some manner.
Right.
And you have to give the devil his due. And so
the devil's in the details.
Hierarchies dispossess people, and that's a big problem. That's the fundamental problem of inequality. But it's also the case that hierarchies happen to be a very efficient way of distributing resources. And it's finally
He's finding his stride. I like it.
Hierarchies are not fundamentally predicated on power. And I would say the biological,
I think people's hatred for capitalism is going to make them miss the message.
To a position of authority that's reliable in a human society, primarily by exploiting other people. It's a very unstable means of
nobody wants to hear
power.
About capitalism from a smart guy with a bunch of money. Because the people who are complaining about capitalism aren't the capital. So they're struggling. They're working for somebody else. That's the life we live.
Okay,
how do you find happiness in that?
Comes up right away is that
right?
Marx also assumes that you can think about history as a binary class struggle with clear divisions between, say, the proletariat and the bourgeoisie.
Bourgeoisie.
And that's actually a problem, because it's not so easy to make a firm division between who's exploiter and who's exploitee, let's say, because it's not obvious. Like in the case of small shareholders, let's say, whether or not they happen to be part of the oppressed or part of the oppressor. This actually turned out to be a big problem in the Russian Revolution. And by big problem, I mean tremendously big problem.
Well,
because
anytime you divide,
you fragment people into multiple identities, and that's a fairly easy thing to do. And you could usually find some axis along which they were part of the oppressor class. It might have been a consequence of their education, or it might have been a consequence of the wealth that they strived to accumulate during their life, or it might have been a consequence of the fact that they had parents or grandparents who were educated or rich, or that they were a member of the priesthood, or that they were socialists, or anyways, the listing of how it was possible for you to be bourgeois instead of proletariat grew immensely, and that was one of the reasons that the Red Terror claimed all the victims that it claimed. And so that was a huge problem. It was probably most exemplified by the demolition of the kulaks, who were...
Okay, so part of my intuitive learning is when I hear something that makes me think, I need to jot it down. but I'm horrible at this. Google Docs. Booyah. Okay, Peterson said, let's go back. I lost it. I'm such a doofus. I put my notes away like a doofus, and I need 'em. I wasn't expecting him to hit on some stuff that I'd be talking about.
Fragment people into multiple identities, and that's a fairly easy thing to do. And you could usually find some axis along which they were part of the oppressor class. It might have been a consequence of their education, or it might have been a consequence of the wealth that they strived to accumulate during their life, or it might have been a consequence of the fact that they had parents or grandparents who were educated or rich, or that they were a member of the priesthood, or that they were socialists, or anyways, the listing of how it was possible for you to be bourgeois instead of proletariat grew immensely, and that was one of the reasons that the Red Terror claimed all the victims that it claimed. And so that was a huge problem. It was probably most exemplified by the demolition of the kulaks, who were basically peasant farmers, although effective ones in the Soviet Union, who had managed to raise themselves out of serfdom over a period of about 40 years and to gather some degree of material security about them. And about 1.8 million of them were exiled. About 400,000 were killed, and the net consequence of that removal of their private property because of their bourgeois status was arguably the death of 6 million Ukrainians in the famines of the 1930s. And so the binary class struggle idea, that was a bad idea. That was a very, very bad idea. It's also bad in this way, and this is a real sleight of hand that Marx pulls off, is you have a binary class division, proletariat and bourgeoisie, and you have an implicit idea that all of the good is on the side of the proletariat and all of the evil is on the side of the bourgeoisie. And that's classic group identity thinking. You know, it's one of the reasons I don't like identity politics, is because once you divide people into groups and pit them against one another, it's very easy to assume that all the evil in the world can be attributed to one group, the hypothetical oppressors, and all the good to the other. And that...
When we embody all of it, right? We are all of it.
Well, and that's naive. That's naive beyond comprehension, because it's absolutely foolish to make the presumption that you can identify someone's moral worth with their economic standing. So, and that actually turned out to be a real problem as well, because
I know that feeling.
Marx also came up with this idea, which is a crazy idea as far as I can tell, of the, that's a technical term, crazy idea.
Oh, he's a comedian again.
Proletariat.
Swish.
That's the next idea that I didn't stumble upon. Okay, so what's the problem? Well, the problem is the capitalists own everything. They own all the means of production, and they're oppressing everyone. And that would be all the workers. And there's going to be a race to the bottom of wages for the workers as the capitalists strive to extract more and more value from the labor of the proletariat by competing with other capitalists to drive wages downward, which, by the way, didn't happen, partly because wage earners can become scarce, and that actually drives the market value upward. But the fact that you assume a priori that all the evil can be attributed to the capitalists and all the good, the bourgeoisie, and all the good could be attributed to the proletariat, meant that you could hypothesize that a dictatorship of the proletariat could come about, and that was the first stage in the communist revolution. And remember, this is a call for revolution, and not just revolution, but bloody, violent revolution, and the overthrowing of all existent social structures. Anyways, the problem with that, you see, is that because all the evil isn't divided so easily up into oppressor and oppressed, that when you do establish a dictator of the proletariat, to the degree that you can do that, which you actually can't because it's technically impossible and an absurd thing to consider to begin with, not least because of the problem of centralization, and you have to hypothesize that you can take away all the property of the capitalists, you can replace the capitalist class with a minority of proletariats, how they're going to be chosen isn't exactly clear in the Communist Manifesto, that none of the people who are from the proletariat class are going to be corrupted by that sudden access to power, because they're, well, by definition, good. So then you have the good people who are running the world, and you also have them centralized so that they can make decisions that are insanely complicated to make, in fact, impossibly complicated to make. And so that's a failure conceptually on both dimensions, because, first of all the proletariat aren't going to be good, and when you put people in the same position as the evil capitalists, especially if you believe
now they become the
social
evil
pressure is
capitalists,
one of
right?
the determining factors
Dun
of
dun
human character,
dun.
which the
That's how
Marxists
the whole
certainly believe,
system's been
then why
working.
wouldn't you assume that the proletariat would immediately become as or more corrupt than the capitalists, which is, of course, I would say exactly what happened every time this experiment was run. And then the next problem is, well, what makes you think that you can take some system as complicated as, like, capitalist free market society and centralize that and put decision-making power in the hands of a few people, the mechanisms without specifying the mechanisms by which you're going to choose them? Like, what makes you think they're going to have the wisdom or the ability to do what the capitalists were doing, unless you assume, as Marx did, that all of the evil was with the capitalists and all the good was with the proletariats, and that nothing that capitalists did constituted valid labor, which is another thing that Marx assumed.
Concept. What if the proletariats were
Like,
poor
maybe if you're a
because they were bad
dissident
people?
aristocrat from 1830 and
Interesting.
or earlier, and you run a feudal estate, and all you do is
They're
spend
not
your time
bad people,
gambling
you know.
and
People with
chasing
no
prostitutes.
intention,
Well,
you know.
then your labor value is zero. But if you're
When you have
if you're
no
running a
intention, you
business
can be
and
led.
it's a successful business, first of all, you're a bloody fool to
So-
exploit your workers, because even if you're greedy as sin, because you're not going to extract the
Maybe they
maximum
didn't
amount
believe
out of
in
them by
God
doing that.
enough.
The notion that
Oh,
you're adding
here
no
comes the crazy
productive value as a
philosophy
manager
of
rather than a
religion.
capitalist is, it's
See, I think we should
absolutely
include
absurd.
all the
it does is
train of
indicate that
thoughts,
you either know nothing
right?
whatsoever about how an actual business
because I look for the
works,
God in
or you
everything,
refuse
right? So we have
know
to
anything about how an actual business
find the
works.
God
So
in
that's-
everything.
That's also a big problem. So then the next problem is the criticism of profit. It's like, well, what's wrong with profit exactly? What's the problem with profit? Well, the idea from the Marxist perspective was that profit was theft. But profit, well, can be theft, because crooked people can run companies, and so sometimes profit is theft, but that certainly doesn't mean that it's always theft. What it means, in part at least, if the capitalist is adding value to the corporation.
I know, but this
then
feels like
there's some
Rocky
utility
versus the
and
Russian
some
guy.
fairness in him or her extracting the value.
I
of
can't wait
their
to see what the other
abstract
guy's
labor,
got. He
their
looks
thought,
so
their
relaxed,
abstract abilities,
yet
their
so
ability to manage
nervous,
the
like
company,
just
to
frazzled. He looks
engage in
frazzled.
proper competition and product
Frazzled, but
development
don't
and
give a
efficiency
F.
and the proper treatment of the workers and all of that. And then if they can create a profit, well, then they
This is
have
what
a
I
little bit
do.
of
I talk over
security
people
for
'cause,
times that aren't so good.
He's
and
just,
that
he'll
seems
say,
absolutely bloody
sometimes,
necessary
I
as
don't know if
far
he's
as I'm
really
concerned.
helping
And
his
then the next thing
points, you know. Sometimes
well,
he's just
how
talking
can you
his
grow
out
if you
of
don't
his
have a
points.
profit? And if you have an enterprise
For me,
that's
anyway.
valuable and worthwhile,
I hope
and
so other
some
people
enterprises are valuable
hang
and
on the edge of their
worthwhile,
seat,
then
like-
it seems to me that a little bit of profit to help you grow seems to be the right approach. And so, and then the other issue with profit, and you know this if you've ever run a business, is it's a really useful constraint.
The
like,
reason
it's not
here,
enough.
the reason I'm kind of tuning out the profit talk, because I understand, profits and profit theft, and just from, my life in business, I understand those things. So I'm not necessarily a capitalist or a Marxist or anything like that. I'm just doing the best that I can in the situation I've been given. And that's where you find the happiness sign. Swish. Point. Me, 1. Peterson, 0. Zizek, 0. So far I'm winning. I might have 2 points. I don't know, but you just gotta see the simplicity of it all. They're still overthinking it. Like, what point does what point does arguing something you can't change? That's my philosophy. I understand it, because we have to have these discussions, but, other people are going to see this and they're going to be like, oh, I need to start thinking about capitalism, and I need to start thinking about that, and I want to protest that. Now you've just become an echo chamber for something, right? Because you didn't stop and think about it. You didn't say, what can I do to change the system if I don't like it? Or how do you even know you'd like the system if you haven't actually participated in it wholeheartedly? Maybe you're right where you need to be in life, and you just need to open your eyes and realize it, and say, I'm just going to do the best in every situation that I'm in, because I can't choose if I'm a capitalist or a Marxist, because I live in America. So I live in a capitalist system. So, it took me a long time to be okay with that. I couldn't. It took me a long time to be okay with that. Like, I didn't like it. I didn't like being in the capitalist system at all. But when I accepted it, I learned how to operate in it, and it's not extremely hard. But it takes a very dedicated mindset, and that's what's hard to get.
To have a good idea. It's not enough to have a good idea and a sales and marketing plan, and then to implement that and all of that. That's bloody difficult. Like, it's not easy to have a good idea, and it's not easy to come up with a good sales and marketing plan, and it's not easy to find customers and satisfy them. And so if you allow profit to constitute a limitation on what it is that you might reasonably attempt, it provides a good constraint on wasted labor. And so most of the things that I've done in my life, even psychologically, that were designed to help people's psychological health, I tried to run on a for-profit basis. And the reason for what that was, apart from the fact that I'm not averse to making a profit, partly so my enterprises can grow, but was also so that there were forms of stupidity that I couldn't engage in because I would be punished by the market enough to eradicate the enterprise. And so
it's just forms of stupidity you can't engage in, guys. You heard it. That's the truth.
Okay, and then so the next issue.
That's the truth.
Marx and Engels also assume that this dictatorship of the proletariat, which involves absurd centralization, the overwhelming probability of corruption.
I'm having so much fun with this. It's like I have a friend now. My face down there. I don't have to be lonely anymore. Hey, friend.
Market economy could run.
We watching this? This right here is cool. Is it?
The next theory is that
yeah, it is pretty cool, isn't it? They're talking about some real shit.
Would become magically hyper-productive, and there's actually no theory at all about how that's going to happen.
Guys.
And so I had to infer the theory, and the theory seems to be that once you eradicate the bourgeoisie because they're evil, and you get rid of their private property, and you eradicate the profit motive, then all of a sudden, magically, the small percentage of the proletariat who now run the society determine how they can make their productive enterprises productive enough so they become hyper-productive. Now, and they need to become hyper-productive for the last error to be logically coherent in relationship to the Marxist theory, which is that at some point the proletariat, the dictatorship of the proletariat, will become so hyper-productive that there'll be enough material goods for everyone across all dimensions. And when that happens, then what people will do is spontaneously engage in meaningful creative labor, which is what they had been alienated from in the...
Oh, cool. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier when I typed up the division of labor. And kind of what he's talking about, the way I understand it, is when people realize that oh, we have this abundance, they'll work creatively, right? So my theory on the division of labor within human species, like an animal, like, how like ants have a division of labor, like these ants do this, these ants do that. Well, I think humans kind of work the same way, but it's not like you're meant to do that one particular thing. It's our brains work in one particular way, right? In the circle, our brains. So when you're sinking, like, so let's say this is a level of consciousness in a circle here. So it's just here, it's constantly orbiting, and then boom, all of a sudden there's this. I forgot what I was talking about. I had so much fun doing this. Ooh, I hypnotized myself doing that. Holy moly. I hypnotized myself doing that. Lost my train of thought. I told you I was dumb. I told you I was dumb. I can't hypnotize myself. I'm dumb. Oh, I'm so dumb. But anyway, the division of labor, I'm trying to kind of explain how that works. But anyway, it's like that's where it is with humans. It's the way your brain works. So there's like different loops that you connect with and on this big spectrum, so to speak. So when we can learn to work creatively, we'll move naturally in the path that our brain works easiest, right? But in order to find that, it's really hard, because it's hard to you're put in this situation to pull that out of you, right? To dig deep inside of you and pull out whatever it is. When you look at the way that plants grow, sometimes you have to dehydrate the seed in order for it to be good, so it requires stress. Stress is it's a required nutrient for the brain, right? But you got to stress it out properly, and you got to heal it properly. That's what I've learned in my experience. But yeah, no, I just got excited because he's kind of touching on the division of labor and in the human species is what I'm working on a little theory. I'm too dumb to understand it, but I kind of have an idea of what it looks like, and that's kind of what the idea is. But I'll be smart enough to fully explain it one day. I'm just starting this early. I'm probably not going to accomplish anything for 70 years, so just I know what my path is, and I think it's going to be fun, and I want to share it with people, because I love to. When you love someone, you share. When you love somebody, you share with them, and part of my religion is loving everyone and sharing with everyone. So you can take from it what you want, or ignore it completely. It's up to you.
Capitalist horror show, and the utopia will be magically ushered in. But there's no indication about
that
how that
mindset, the mindset
about, and there's no
ushers in
there's
that.
also no
All right?
understanding.
People think by making it on the outside, it'll be on the inside. But no, you got to make it on the inside,
suit everyone,
then make it on the outside.
There are great differences between people, and some people are going to find what they want in love, and some are going to find it in social being, and some are going to find it in conflict and competition, and some are going to find it in creativity, as Marx pointed out. But the notion that will necessarily be the end goal for the utopian state is preposterous. And then there's the Dostoyevskian observation too.
Well, here's where I disagree. Finally, we finally find a point where I disagree. So I disagree that the end goal is for all of us to be, to create. Not necessarily be creative, but to create what it is we're here to create. And I think I'm here to help inspire people, to create, because I'm not good at anything. So if I can accomplish anything, and then I can tell a guy that, hey man, I'm an idiot and I did something pretty cool, and he'll be like, what? I could do that? And he'll be like, and you're an idiot for real? I'm like, faux show. I'm as dumb as a sack of potatoes. And he'll be like, what? I'm not gonna kill myself. I'm gonna go live. And I'll be like, got him. Swish. Got him. Oh, but I'm horrible at staying on topic.
Which is one not to be taken lightly, which is, what sort of shallow conception of people do you have that makes you think that if you gave people enough bread and cake, in the Dostoyevskian terms?
Well, I think people need to create, right? And people need to be able to create whatever it is that is in their heart to create. Now, I see art in everything. So when I talk about art, I mean everything from, from being a doctor to being an engineer. Like, anybody who knows anyone who's in those, any scientific field will tell you the best of the best are like artists in their field, because all of it is art, right? When you look at it from the perspective that this collective conscious experience was, is an accumulation of our hard work of trillions of years to create this experience that we can now interact with, in a profound way, right? We can interact now, and our technology is getting better and better, We're starting to match what's in here out here, right? If you don't see that in the real world, you need to wake up and see that we're starting to manifest almost everything that is in here. Look for it. All right, we've got, got space shuttles, man. We're gonna see space tourism in our day and age. I never believed I'd see space tourism when I was a kid. I didn't think I'd see that, And now, because the flat Earth theory, I think the flat Earth theory is just to sell space tourist tickets, honestly. How else are you gonna get people to risk their lives to get on a space charter flight to, see if the world is round, and then, oh no, the plane fell off the side of the Earth, guys, it's flat, and then they just uh-oh, scares everybody. I don't think, I think flat Earth is just a really early marketing technique to get people to buy tickets to space, because it's risky. You gotta be. If I could afford a ticket to space, I'd probably do it. That's just because I believe that's what God would want me to do. What my God that I think about in my head would be like, yeah, it's cool. If you die, you die. But do that junk. It probably sounds pretty cool. Sounds like a good experience. You should do it. Yeah, I'll do it. If I could afford a ticket to space, I'll go. I bet, shoot, probably people try to buy me one just so I would blow up. People, that's how you use creation magic. You just do good, and people will hate you for doing good, and they'll hate you so much they'll start to bless you. It's weird, but yeah, no, that's where we disagree now. Is I think, all humans need is to create. This is our playground. We need to play, right? Earth is our playground. We're the kids. We're still the kids that we were, So we need to play, right? We don't need to work. See, that's the thing. They're still thinking about working. They want to get up and go to work, but they're not working. They're living their life, and they're living what they're doing. So they don't understand. They don't have the disconnect between, getting up and being happy, going to doing what you're doing every day, and then wake up and saying, man, I really hate my job. I'm going to, because these gentlemen have full abilities to change their situation immediately, almost. I mean, hell, I'll buy a stand-up ticket to see Peterson any day, because this guy's hilarious, right? But at the end of the day, they're still, they didn't simplify happiness enough, because take work out of the equation. We need to figure out how to live without working. We got the technology to do it. I demand it to be done. I command this to be done. We need to figure out how to live happily and provide the opportunities for everybody who wants to learn to do something, that opportunity, but also they're not dying to do it. You know, they don't have to decide if they're going to take their asthma medicine or pay their light bill. You know what I'm saying? That's the problem that we have in the society today. And, you know, it's easy for guys to sit up here who get up every day and do what they want to talk about happiness, but also have, you know, essentially, you know, they have the option to live the way that they want. I'm sure the other guy makes a decent amount of money, enough to whatever he wants. I mean, and if he doesn't, he can spin this into, you know, he could spin his newfound, you know, philosophy career into a social media thing and make a ton of money on that. You know, so he can immediately change his, you know, circumstances, you know, and because he's got the ability to do it. But now we're talking about happiness. What about the people who don't have the means to change what they have? You know, how do they be happy? How do they be happy, y'all? Y'all know that? I know that. I know that. Y'all know that? Y'all know that? I don't think y'all know that. 3 points. 3 points. I'm winning this debate already.
Nothing to do with except to busy themselves with the continuity of the species, that they would also all of a sudden become peaceful and heavenly. Dostoyevsky's idea was that, you know, we were built for trouble. And if we were ever handed everything we needed on a silver platter, the first thing we would do is engage in some form of creative destruction, just so something unexpected could happen, just so we could have the adventure of our lives.
That's what that's.
And I think there's some
truth to that.
Said for that.
There's definitely some truth to that.
So, and then the last error.
You can't be mixing truths with untruths. Because you haven't even thought about it far enough, right? You stand out there on your philosophy and say, this was what I say. But you didn't think it, you didn't simplify it enough for yourself. Y'all still thinking about work. Why trying to work?
Material commodities.
Am I trying to know job? Am I trying to know proletariat?
That's extensively
I'm trying to know bourgeoisie. I want none of y'all's responsibility. I just want to play.
Look, we got to get as much material security for everyone as possible, as fast as we can. And capitalism already seems to be doing that at a rate that's unparalleled in human history.
Capitalism can help.
Just to let the damn system play itself out. I mean, unless you're assuming that the evil capitalists are just going to take all of the flat screen televisions and put them in one big room and not let anyone else have one. The logical assumption is that, well, you're already on a road that's supposed to produce the proper material productivity. And so, well, that's 10 reasons. As far as
the problem with our modern day
so
capitalism is slavery.
Like
they got people out here working for $7 excuse my language, $7 an hour? $7.25? What? I'd rather not have a job. Just
Marx was the kind of
I've had to work that life. I don't ever want to go back. Probably have to go back soon though, because that's life.
So was Engels. But what he thought,
it makes me so angry thinking that other people have to do that.
Was correct. And he
Luckily, I
never
make $10 an hour.
Wait a second. How could all of this go terribly wrong? And if you're a thinker, especially a sociological thinker, especially a thinker on the broad scale,
actually, I think I do work for about $7 an hour, and I give half my money to my ex-wife.
You might be wrong about one of your fundamental axioms, or 2 or 3 or 10, and as a consequence, you have
Peterson,
you
got a couple of holes in your thing too,
what if
buddy.
I'm completely wrong here, and things invert and go exactly the wrong way. And like I just can't understand how anybody could come up with an idea like the dictatorship of the proletariat, especially after advocating its implementation with violent means, which is a direct part of the Communist Manifesto, and actually think, if they were thinking, if they knew anything about human beings and the proclivity for malevolence that's part and parcel of the individual human being, that could do anything but lead.
Sound like it when he talks from his heart and not his head, right? When he's talking from his heart, you can, you know it, you know.
I have 3 minutes.
That's where the truth is.
A bit of evidence as well.
When he starts talking from his head, he's thinking too much.
Marx
also gets on a
that
roll.
What would happen inevitably as a consequence of capitalism is the rich would get richer and the poor would get poorer. So there would be inequality. The first thing I'd like to say is we do not know how to set up a human system of economics without inequality. No one has ever managed it, including the communists. And the form of inequality changed, and it's not obvious by any stretch of imagination that the free market economies of the West have more inequality than the less free economies in the rest of the world. And the one thing you can say about capitalism is that although it produces inequality, which it absolutely does, it also produces wealth, and all the other systems don't. They just produce inequality.
Good point. Good point. Good point.
So here's a few stats. Here's a few free market stats, okay?
However, you see, there is a truth, but the truth, where capitalism does generate wealth in the material sense, but it also can generate wealth in the spiritual sense, because it's really hard to make it in this society, and you've got to trust some unknown forces. When you want to be successful in this world, you've got to put some reliance in something unknown, because unless you're just that crazy to think that everything you do is going to work, and it does, and you're just that lucky like me, then, get lucky. Be stupid and I'd rather be lucky than smart any day of the week, because this is a ride, brother. But, man, I think that's, what when we talk about wealth, we need to understand, there's two different types of wealth. There's the spiritual wealth and there's material wealth, and you have to create the spiritual wealth to create the material wealth. And it doesn't necessarily mean bowing down and worshiping a god or anything like that. That just means, when you as a human focus on your goals and your dreams, you don't let anything stop you, and you look for every opportunity. And the more you think about your dreams and your goals, the more opportunities you find. And the more opportunities you find, the more you capitalize on those opportunities. Because you're focused on your goals, you're not distracted. And when you're focused on your goals, you can rise through the hell of the, poverty system. I'm hoping. I'm trying. I got a couple, like I said, I'm working on some, got some businesses trying to take off the ground, and it's because I've seen, if you guys knew the idiots that ran these big companies, you'd be like, oh yeah, man, here, take the keys to all these companies, Matt. Man, these companies out here are ran by complete morons. I mean, the technology's old. They refuse to invest. Like all these. That's the reason. Like capitalism. If capitalism would invest in capitalism, we would all be living pretty decent lives, because we'd all have a decent standard of living, because we'd all be getting paid decently enough to go do a stupid job that we hate. We'd be paid enough to make it worth getting up in the morning, because when you're paid enough, you don't have to stress, right? And when you're stressed about things that don't matter, like money, you can't harness your spiritual power. Sorry, I took too long on that one.
From 1800 to 2017, income growth adjusted for inflation grew by 40 times for production workers and 16 times for unskilled labor. Well, GDP rose by a factor of about 0.5 from 180 to 1800. So from 180 to 1800 AD, it was like nothing, flat. And then all of a sudden, in the last 217 years, there's been this unbelievably upward movement of wealth. And it doesn't only characterize the tiny percentage of people at the top who, admittedly, do have most of the wealth. The question is, not only, though, what's the inequality? The question is, well, what's happening to the absolutely poor at the bottom? And the answer to that is, they're getting richer faster now than they ever have in the history of the world. And we're eradicating poverty in countries that have adopted moderate free market policies at a rate that's unparalleled. So here's an example. The UN one of the UN millennial goals was to reduce the the rate of absolute poverty in the world by 50% between 2000 and 2015. And they define that as $1.90 a day. Pretty low, you know, but you have to start somewhere. We hit that at 2012, 3 years ahead of schedule. And you might be cynical about that and say, well, it's kind of an arbitrary number, but the curves are exactly the same at $3.80 a day and $7.60 a day. Not as many people have hit that, but the rate of increase towards that is the same. The bloody UN thinks that we'll be out of poverty defined by $1.90 a day by the year 2030. It's unparalleled. And so the rich may be getting richer, but the poor are getting richer too. And that's not the...
That's true. You raise the highest, you raise the mean.
Because I'm out of time. But I'll leave it with this. The poor are not getting poorer under capitalism. The poor are getting richer under capitalism by a large margin.
That is true.
I'll leave you with one statistic, which is that now...
Poor do not realize how much they got, but I tell you what,
the child mortality
when I
rate in
realized how
Africa
much I had,
is the
I was
same
like,
as the child
shoot, I can
mortality
live. I can
was in
live.
Europe in
Pretty
1952.
fun.
And so that's happened within the span of one
With no
lifetime.
money ever.
And so if you're for the poor,
I just
you're
have to
for
find the
poor,
fun within
you're actually
myself
concerned that the poorest people
and
in the
be
world
okay
rise
with being
above
alone.
their starvation levels.
If you can master that,
All
life's
the
pretty
evidence
freaking fun.
suggests that the best way to do that is to implement something approximating a free market economy. And so, thank you very much.
Thank you. That was good. I liked it. I liked it. That went well. This guy, he does look like a raccoon, doesn't he? He's like, oh, he does look like a witch. I saw a meme.
Peterson.
Said a witch
Dr.
turned him
Zizek.
into
Thank you.
a raccoon. That's exactly what it looks like. Memes are so accurate. I love memes. I love it. He's gonna sit down. I gotta walk when I do this. I guess old stand-up comic habits.
Okay. First, a brief introductory remark. I cannot but notice the irony of how Peterson and I, the participants in this duel of the century, are both marginalized by the official academic community. I'm supposed to defend here the left liberal line against neoconservatives. Really? Most of the attacks on me are now precisely from left liberals. Just remember the outcry against my critique of LGBT plus ideology. And I'm sure that if the leading figures in this field were to be asked if I am fit to stand for them, they would turn in their graves even if they are still alive. So let me begin by bringing together the three notions from the title: happiness, communism, capitalism. In one exemplary case, China today. China in the last decades is arguably the greatest economic success story in human history. Hundreds of millions raised from poverty into middle-class existence.
There's a large number of people.
China achieve it? The 20th century left was defined by its opposition to the two fundamental tendencies of modernity: the reign of capital with its aggressive market competition, the authoritarian bureaucratic state power. Today's China combines these two features in its extreme form: strong authoritarian state, wild capitalist dynamics. And it's important to note, they do it on behalf of happiness of the majority of people. They don't mention communism to legitimize their rule. They prefer the old Confucian notion of a harmonious society. But are the Chinese any happier for all that? Although even the Dalai Lama justifies Tibetan Buddhism in Western terms of the pursuit of happiness and the avoidance of pain, happiness as a goal of our life is a very problematic notion. If we learned anything from psychoanalysis, it is that we humans are very creative in sabotaging our pursuit of happiness.
I know that's
Happiness
right.
is a confused
Swish.
notion.
Hold
Basically,
on. We gotta talk about that, man. Humans definitely self-sabotage. I don't know if you can have. I'm trying my best to understand him, but I think ultimately what he was talking about, just and I think he's breaking down happiness right now, and it's getting interesting because there's definitely some truth into that. We definitely self-sabotage, guys, in ways you have no idea. There's such small ways. When you learn yourself, you can learn how to prevent yourself from self-sabotage, and that is huge, 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 huge. Because when you stop self-sabotaging yourself, you go, because you are powerful and you can do anything, and I can motivate you to do it. Because I'm already having fun with life, man. So when I'm having fun with life, that's what you do, man. You encourage other people to have. I want other people to have fun with me. I'd much rather have friends than, other than just talking to myself and watching this debate. I would like to, talk to friends and stuff, but no one seems to want to talk about this stuff when you're poor. Everybody's like, I don't want to worry about this stuff. Like, well, keep worrying about that other stuff then. See how that goes for the next 30 years, and it's just sad.
On the subject's inability or unreadiness to fully confront the consequences of their desire. In our daily lives, we pretend to desire things which we do not really desire, so that ultimately the worst thing that can happen is for us to get what we officially desire. So I agree that human life of freedom and dignity does not consist just in searching for happiness, no matter how much we spiritualize it, or in the effort to actualize our inner potentials. We have to find some meaningful cause beyond the mere struggle for pleasurable survival.
True.
However, I would like to add here a couple of
I'm listening.
qualifications. First, since we live in a modern era, we cannot simply refer to an unquestionable authority to confer a mission or task on us. Modernity means that, yes, we should carry the burden. But the main burden is freedom itself. We are responsible for our burdens. Not only are we not allowed cheap excuses for not doing our duty, duty itself should not serve as an excuse. We are never just instruments of some higher cause. Once traditional authority loses its substantial power, it is not possible to return to it. All such returns are today a postmodern fake. Does Donald Trump stand for traditional values? No. His conservatism is a postmodern performance, a gigantic ego trip. In this sense of playing with traditional values, of mixing references to them with open obscenities, Trump is the ultimate postmodern president.
I agree.
If we compare Trump with Bernie Sanders, Trump is a postmodern politician at its purest, while Sanders is rather an old-fashioned moralist. Conservative thinkers claim that the origin of our crisis is the loss of our reliance on some transcendent divinity or higher value. If we are left to ourselves, if everything is historically conditioned and relative.
Okay, so I guess what I was agreeing with when he said that Trump was like the ultimate postmodern president, it's like he's the ultimate capitalist president. That's like, and capitalism is eating itself, so modern times have already passed us, right? So, but he is the exclamation point on our way of life. This is, American way of life is capitalized by this, and regardless of what he stands for, it's, he used the system to, he became the capital, right? And that's just an example of what you can do when you become the capital. And, he figured out how to become the capital, and he wrote it, right? Regardless of how you feel about him, he became the capital and he wrote it. And now he's running the country, right? I mean, for what it's worth, if you look at things for what they are, that's what you can extrapolate from that, right? Is that he's just an example of what you can do with what little you have, right? With a capitalist system. So, I don't, and I'm pretty sure he's, he might, I don't know if he's happy or not. I said, I don't know. I don't know ever since I became happy, I haven't met many happy people. And I mean, that's ultimately why I started the church, because I couldn't find any happy people to talk to. You know, when you're living, you know, when everybody's struggling, you know, it's like when you're happy, you can't be around people who aren't, you know, for very long, because it's, you know, it's, you know what I'm talking about. But, you know, it's like,
then there is nothing preventing us to indulge in our lowest tendencies. But is this really the lesson to be learned from mob killing, looting, and burning on behalf of religion? It is often claimed that, true or not, religion makes some otherwise bad people do good things. From today's experience, I think we should rather stick to Steve Weinberg's claim that while without religion, good people would have been doing good things and bad people bad things, only something like religion can make good people do bad things. More than a century ago, in his Brothers Karamazov,
keep me honest, guys. Keep me honest. I won't do no bad things. I don't do no bad things by y'all. I don't do no bad things by me. Let's just live and have fun and play. Keep me honest, guys.
Philosopher André Glucksmann applied,
and I mean, guys, in a universal sense.
Godless
Not.
nihilism.
I don't think of people as
And the title of his book,
division,
Dostoyevsky in
right? So if
Manhattan,
I say guys, I mean
suggests,
all of you.
as this
Don't matter
title
what you are.
suggests,
You
he
my
couldn't
guy.
have been more wrong. The lesson of
'Cause you got the
today's
masculine in you
terrorism
too.
is that if there
And the
is
feminine.
a God,
Got them both.
then everything, even blowing up hundreds of innocent
Yeah,
bystanders,
I won't
is
talk about
permitted
death and stuff.
to
I get
those
that. I
who
get those
claim
points,
to
right?
act directly on behalf of God. The
Right.
same goes also
But
for
a God would
godless
never
Stalinist
want you to
communists.
kill
They
anybody.
are the ultimate proof of it. Everything was permitted to them since they perceived themselves as direct instrument of their divinity, of the historical necessity of progress towards communism. That's the big problem of ideologies. How to make good, decent people do horrible things. Second, yes, we should carry our burden, accept the suffering that goes with it. But a danger lurks here, that of a subtle reversal. Don't fall in love, that's my position, with your suffering. Never presume that your suffering is in itself a proof of your authenticity. Renunciation of pleasure can easily turn into pleasure of renunciation itself. For example, an example not from neoconservatives. White left liberals love to denigrate their own culture and blame Eurocentrism for our evils. But it is instantly clear how this self-denigration brings a profit of its own. Through this renouncing of their particular roots, multicultural liberals reserve for themselves the universal position, graciously soliciting others to assert their particular identity. White multiculturalist liberals embody the lie of identity politics. Next point. Jacques Lacan wrote something paradoxical but deeply true, that even if what a jealous husband claims about his wife, that she sleeps with other men, is all true, his jealousy is nonetheless pathological. The pathological element is the husband's need for jealousy, as the only way for him to sustain his identity. Along the same lines, one could say that even if most of the Nazi claims...
Okay, so I had to break that down in my head, so I'm going to break it down for you guys. What he's basically saying is, you know, the jealous husband, right? If you're in let's say you're in a relationship, and two what is a relationship really, but two equal parts becoming one, right? And when there's infidelity in a relationship, that means the parts are unequal, right? So you probably shouldn't get in a relationship with someone who doesn't have the same expectations of you, because the jealousy of your mate, let's say, you're the type of person that likes to have multiple partners. Well, there are other partners that like to do that too, and then maybe you're the type of that doesn't want your partner to have it. Well, there's those type of relationships too. You got to find those people, right? Find those people who are into those things instead of just being into those things and hurting people in the process, right? You don't have to hurt anyone to have multiple partners. You don't have to hurt anyone to do your thing, right? And that's what I'm trying to teach people, is you don't have to hurt anyone to do your thing and be happy, right? And ultimately, that's because the construct of like those jealous thoughts, any thought like that is self-imposed, right? You create that, right? Because you're jealous because of what? You have to break that down. Is it because you feel that you have some kind of ownership? Is it it's an ego thing, right? Is if you don't want someone playing with your toys. That's all it is, because if that's how you see a woman or a man, then you don't truly understand love and freedom, right? If you understand love and freedom, then you're not going to box your friend or lover in, and you're not going to encourage them to be promiscuous. You're going to enjoy them for who they are. You're not going to try to change them. And if who they are matches who you are, then you guys can probably have a really good, long-lasting relationship. But if the two parts don't match, but you still really love each other, then just figure out a way how it works and move on about your life. You don't have to, I think people, this idea that we're just throwing relationships together. I think I'm going off tangent here, but maybe I'll talk about it later if anyone's interested. We'll get back to this.
About Jews.
But I was basically just explaining how, what he was saying about jealousy being a construct of mind. You create it in your head, right? You don't have to be jealous, right? You can be okay, cut, whatever. It doesn't matter, right? Because like the women that I deal with, they're not promiscuous women, right? And I don't bound them to any of my rules, because I live my life my way, and I don't expect them to live their life my way. I expect them to live their life their way, and I encourage them to do so, right? Probably to a fault, right? But that's what I believe. So, I'm going to, I'm completely honest with them about everything, so. You can find the types of relationships that will work for your life, because we're all lonely and we all just want, someone to hang out with that's as cool as that guy. You're my best pal, buddy. Bang, high five. I'm in love with myself, and I'm sharing it with the world. I've never thought I'd be at this point in my life, because I hated myself for like 31 years, maybe 33 years or so. Hated myself.
They exploit Germans, they seduce German girls, and so on. Were true, which they were not, of course. Their anti-Semitism would be a pathological phenomenon, because it ignored the true reason why the Nazis needed anti-Semitism. In the Nazi vision, their society is an organic whole of harmonious collaboration, so an external intruder is needed to account for divisions and antagonisms. The same holds for how today, in Europe at least, the anti-immigrant populists deal with the refugees. The cause of problems, which are, I claim, immanent to today's global capitalism, is projected onto an external intruder. Again, even if the reported incident with the refugees, there are great problems, I admit it. Even all these reports are true. The populist story about them is a lie. With anti-Semitism, we are approaching the topic of telling stories. Hitler was one of the greatest storytellers of the 20th century. In the 1920s, many Germans experienced their situation as a confused mess. They didn't understand what is happening to them, with military defeat, economic crisis, what they perceived as moral decay, and so on. Hitler provided a story, a plot, which was precisely that of a Jewish plot. we are in this mess because of the Jews. That's what I would like to insist on. We are telling ourselves stories about ourselves in order to acquire a meaningful experience of our lives. However, this is not enough. One of the most stupid wisdoms, and they are mostly stupid, is an enemy is someone whose story you have not heard. Really? Are you also ready to affirm that Hitler was our enemy because his story was not heard? The experience that we have of our lives from within, the story we tell ourselves about ourselves in order to account for what we are doing is, and this is what I call ideology, fundamentally a lie. The truth lies outside in what we do. In a similar way, the alt-right obsession.
I agree to a degree and I disagree to a degree, because I think what he said was that, you know, it's without, right, that need, but it's both. It's a harmonious thing, right? So it's not necessarily black and white. There needs to be harmony within and harmony without, and you have to figure that out, and you'll never figure out the harmony without until you figure out the harmony within. Right? Once you understand yourself and how you operate and the harmony in which your body operates and how to maximize your vibrations, then you can Superman now. You know, I mean, that's, you know, I learn a lot from rappers, you know. Yeah, I learn a lot from them, man. They're so full of wisdom, dude. But yeah, no, that's where I disagree and agree. It's kind of, there's degrees to what he's saying, but that's the problem with philosophy in my point of views, because it's too, you know, a true philosophical debate. We need to debate every meaning of every word, right? Because until you won't gain understanding if I'm talking in double speak, or if I'm using something that you don't understand, you know, that's just a small part, you know. So, you know, you have to be able to digest it. And that's kind of like, you know, I'm just doing the things that I like to do, but also sharing my own digestion. So you maybe can get an idea on how I intuitively learn, and you can apply it to yourself. Hopefully, over time, I can figure out how to teach it to somebody, you know.
With cultural Marxism expresses the rejection to confront the fact that the phenomena they criticize as the effect of the cultural Marxist plot, moral degradation, sexual promiscuity, consumerist hedonism, and so on, are the outcome of the immanent dynamic of capitalist societies. I would like to refer to a classic, Daniel Bell, Cultural Contradictions of Capitalism, written back in 1976. Where the author argues that the unbounded drive of modern capitalism undermines the moral foundations of the original Protestant ethics. And in a new afterword, Bell offers a bracing perspective on contemporary Western societies, revealing the crucial cultural fault lines we face as the 21st century is here. The turn towards culture as a key component of capitalist reproduction, and concomitant to it, the commodification of cultural life itself, are, I think, crucial moments of capitalist expanded reproduction. So the term cultural Marxism, I think, plays the same role as that of the Jewish plot in anti-Semitism. It projects or transposes some immanent antagonism, however you call it, ambiguity, tension, of our socio-economic life onto an external cause. In exactly the same way, now let me give you a different, more problematic example. In exactly the same way, liberal critics of Trump and alt-right never seriously ask how our liberal society could give birth to Trump. In this sense, the image of Donald Trump is also a fetish, the last thing a liberal sees before confronting actual social tensions. Hegel's motto,
Right.
evil
Swish.
resides in the
Hold up.
case
Did you get that, guys? Did you hear that? Whoa. I don't think people heard that. I don't think people heard that. Whoa. Donald Trump is the last thing the liberal sees before facing social tensions. Whoa. Swish. Swish. You ain't lying about that, right? Because, you know, once you start actually facing things, those things become irrelevant.
Which sees evil everywhere, fully applies here. The very liberal gaze which demonizes Trump is also evil because it ignores how its own failures opened up the space for Trump's type of patriotic populism. Next point. One should stop blaming hedonist egotism for our woes. The true opposite of egotist self-love is not altruism, a concern for the common good, but envy, resentment, which makes me act against my own interests. This is why, as many perspicuous...
It's funny because, you know, acting against my own self-interest is being altruistic. You know, it's like, but there's like a paradoxical line, I think, because I'm aligning my personal skills and abilities with a higher purpose, right? I'm not adjusting what I do to be part of that higher purpose. I just, you know, I took the both and made them one within me, you know, like who I am and what I think the unknown is. And instead of separating them, I, you know, decided to combine them. So like, man, I'm like, man, it's too complicated to keep them separate. I'm dumb. I need it simple. I need it simple. So I combined them into one, and that's kind of where the happiness came. You know, like it was, you know, combining my, you know, seeing how, you know, all my dreams could come true, you know, by helping others. You know, I'm not going to, you know, I may not be as rich as I, you know, used to want to be, but I know I'm trying to help facilitate a better life for people by encouraging people to find their own path to happiness versus trying to box their happiness into something, right? And that's, you know, one of the reasons I wanted to kind of break this debate down, because, you know, there are a lot of truths to be had here, because philosophy is full of a lot of truths, but it's also full of a lot of, you know, different degreed terms, because each one of these philosophers came across this philosophy on their own through their own experience, right? So they're speaking their truth the way they see it, and you have to understand and respect that. And when you understand and respect that, then you look for the truth in what they're saying, instead of saying, you know, oh, I'm going to not agree, or I'm going to disagree, or I'm going to agree. You say, I don't know, I'm just going to look for the truth in it, and we'll see what happens. And I like philosophy because, like I said, there's a lot of truth in it, and it's just, you know, I don't know. My stupid brain's having a hard time breaking all this stuff down. So I know there's, you know, some people out there that might have some questions.
Clearly so. Evil is profoundly spiritual, in some sense more spiritual than goodness. This is why egalitarianism itself should never be accepted at its face value. It can well secretly invert the standard renunciation accomplished to benefit others. Egalitarianism often de facto means I am ready to renounce something so that others will also not have it. This is, I think, now comes the problematic part for some of you, maybe the problem with political correctness. What appears as its excesses, its regulatory zeal, is, I think, an impotent reaction that masks the reality of a defeat. My hero is here a black lady, Tarana Burke, who created the Me Too campaign more than a decade ago. She observed in a recent critical note that in the years since the movement began, it deployed an unwavering obsession with the perpetrators. Me Too is all too often a genuine protest filtered through resentment. Should we then drop egalitarianism? No. Equality can also mean, and that's the equality I advocate, creating the space for as many as possible individuals to develop their different potentials. It is, that's my paradoxical claim, it is today's capitalism that equalizes us too much and causes the loss of many talents. So what about the balance between equality and hierarchy? Did we really move too much?
So I think it's not necessarily capitalism that is destroying that. It's the slave mentality that is being pushed on to Americans, right? This idea that we have to work, and when you look at work the way I look at work, is having a garden work? No, that's play. Let's play in the mud and let's plant some stuff, right? Gardening, we've turned it into work. But, we can build small sustainable communities and grow our food or do whatever we need to do. It's like, when you understand the division of labor in the brain, you're like, oh, this is where I fit in because I really like doing this. And when you find out what you really, really like doing, and then you're like, ooh, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do. And you do it, it could be making plates, right? And you just start making plates out of anything you find. You're like, I'm going to make plates. And you start, boom, oh, look, I'm going to turn this into a plate. Oh, haha, I have a plate. And now you go out and you share that with the world. You're like, I love plates, guys. I just want to make plates. Plates. I'm really good at making plates. You don't know how good I am at making plates. And then it's like, man, all right, cool. And nobody pays attention, right? But you're super excited about your plates, and nobody cares. And then you give up because no one cares about your plates. Well, you're supposed to make plates, right? If that's what really drove you, you just gave up too soon. I gave up on every dream I had. I pursued it for like a couple of years and gave up. I'd pursue a dream for a couple of years and give up. I pursued a dream for a couple of years and give up. I just get burnt out. And just I'd get burnt out over and over again, thinking that I was, trying to be happy, and that was the problem. I was trying to be happy instead of creating the happiness, instead of saying, aha, happiness doesn't exist. You have to make it, and it's unique to everyone.
Too much in the direction of equality. Is there, in today's United States, really too much equality? I think a simple overview of the situation points in the opposite direction. Far from pushing us too far, the left is gradually losing its ground already for decades. Its trademarks, universal health care, free education, and so on, are continuously diminished. Look at Bernie Sanders, and I don't idealize him, program. It is just a version of what half a century ago in Europe was simply the predominant social democracy, and it's today decried as a threat to our freedoms, to the American way of life, and so on and so on. I see no threat to free creativity in this program. On the contrary, I see healthcare and education and so on as enabling me to focus my life on more important creative issues. I see equality, this basic equality of chances, as a space for creating differences, and yes, why not, even different, more appropriate hierarchies. Furthermore, I find it very hard to ground today's inequalities, as they are documented, for example, by Piketty in his book, on to ground today's inequalities in different competencies. Competencies for what? In totalitarian states, competencies are determined politically. But market success is also not innocent and neutral as a regulator of the social recognition of competencies. Let me now briefly deal with a in a friendly way, I claim, with what became known, sorry for the irony, as the lobster topic. I'm far from a simple social constructionism here. I deeply appreciate evolutionary thought. Of course, we are also natural beings, and our DNA, as we all know, overlaps, I may be wrong, around 98% with that of some monkeys. This means something, but nature, I think,
This means something.
is not
Yeah.
a stable hierarchical system, but full of improvisations. It
Hierarchy system, division of labor of the mind, find out what your mind does, the best and cater your life to that.
develops like
That's what the hierarchy should be. It's not necessarily, oh, I'm lording over you, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, hey guys, my brain works like this, and I'm really good at solving these types of problems, so I need to get with other people that solve these types of problems. And together we can solve big problems because our brains think this way. And when you can sync up more loops, you can create a more efficient system instead of, yada, yada, yada. But anyway.
French cuisine. A French guy gave me this idea that the origin of many famous French dishes or drinks is that when they wanted to produce a standard piece of food or drink, something went wrong, but then they realized that this failure can be resold as success. They were making cheese in the usual way, but the cheese got rotten and infected, smelling bad, and they said, oh my God, look, we have our own original French cheese. Or they were making wine in the usual way. Then something went wrong with fermentations, and so they began to produce champagne, and so on and so on. I'm not making just a joke here, because I think that it is exactly like this and that's the lesson of psychoanalysis, that our sexuality works. Sexual instincts are, of course, biologically determined. But look what we humans made out of them. They are not limited to the mating season. They can develop into a permanent obsession, sustained by obstacles that demand to be overcome. In short, into a properly metaphysical passion that perturbs the biological rhythm, with twists like endlessly prolonging satisfaction in courtly love, engaging in different perversions, and so on and so on. So it's still, yes, biologically conditioned sexuality, but it is, if I may use this term, trans-functionalized. It becomes a moment of a different cultural, however you call it, logic. And I claim the same goes for tradition. T.S. Eliot, the great conservative, wrote, quote, what happens when a new work of art is created is something that happens simultaneously to all the work of art which preceded it. The past should be altered by the present as much as the present is directed by the past. End of quote. What does this mean? Let me mention the change enacted by Christianity. It's not just that, in spite of all our natural and cultural differences, the same divine spark dwells in everyone. But this divine spark enables us to create what Christians call Holy Ghost or Holy Spirit, a community in which hierarchic family values are at some level at least abolished. Remember Paul's words from Galatians. There is no longer Jew or Greek. There is no longer male and female in Christ. Democracy extends this.
Interesting. That particular verse came, let's see, what did he say it was? Oh, what did he say it was? Something in Galatians? I don't even know where that is. Where's that in the book? What was he talking about? Let's find it. Let's find it and see what he's talking about. Because that sounds interesting as far as the esoteric meaning of the Christ when we are all one. That's interesting. Interesting that he would bring that up. Interesting. Let's see. Hey, do you know where Galatians is in the Bible? I'm the worst preacher, guys. I just want to make people happy, that's all. I'm just doing the best I can. All right, well.
Logic to the political space. In spite of all differences in competence, the ultimate decision should stay with all of us. The wager of democracy is that we should not give all power to competent experts. It was precisely communists in power who legitimized their rule by posing as fake experts. And incidentally, I'm far from believing in ordinary people's wisdom. We often need a master figure to push us out of an inertia. And I'm not afraid to say that forces us to be free. Freedom and responsibility hurt. They require an effort. And the highest function of an authentic master is to literally to awaken us to our freedom. We are not spontaneously really free. Furthermore,
It's true.
I think that social power and authority cannot be directly grounded in competence. In our human universe, power, in the sense of exerting authority, is something much more mysterious.
Found Thessalonians. I didn't find Galatians yet.
My and everybody
Found Galatians.
theologist wrote, if a child says he will obey his father because his father is a competent and good guy,
Well,
this
I'll
is
read
an
Galatians
affront to father's authority.
later.
And he applied
Intuitive
the
learning,
same,
guys. Intuitive learning.
logic
I have
to
a Bible.
Christ himself.
He brings it up.
Christ was justified by
About
the fact of
the-
being God's son, not by his competencies or capacities. As Kierkegaard put it, every good student of theology can put things better than Christ. There is no such authority in nature. Lobsters may have hierarchy, undoubtedly, but the main guy among them, I don't think he has authority in this sense. Again, the wager of democracy is that, and that's the subtle thing, not against competence and so on, but that political power and competence or expertise should be kept apart. In Stalinism, precisely, they were not kept apart, while already in ancient...
So the reason I bookmarked Galatians is, it's part of my intuitive learning process where I look for synchronizations. And typically a synchronization for me is when I will recognize a topic within a topic. Right? I'll be enjoying something and then something else will come up that may remind me that I, was recently thinking about this. And so that's, when I come across those things, I notate them and then I, investigate them further. So, so it's just part of the process, intuitive learning. Back to the show.
Greece. They knew that they have to be kept apart, which is why their popular weight was even combined with lottery often. So where does communism, just to conclude, where does communism enter here? Why do I still cling to this cursed name when I know and fully admit the 20th century communist project in all its failure, how it failed giving birth to new forms of murderous terror? Capitalism won, but today, and that's my claim, we can debate about it, the question is,
Get
does
my plant
today's
some
global
sun.
capitalism contain strong enough antagonisms which prevent its indefinite reproduction? I think there are such antagonisms. The threat of ecological catastrophe, the consequence of new techno-scientific developments, especially in biogenetics, and new forms of apartheid. All these antagonisms concern what Marx called commons, the shared substance of our social being. First, of course, the commons of external nature, threatened by pollution, global warming, and so on. Now, let me be precise here. I'm well aware how uncertain analysis and projections are in this domain. It will be certain only when it will be too late. And I am well aware of the temptation to engage in precipitous extrapolations. When I was younger, to give you a critical example, there was in Germany an obsession with Waldsterben, the dying of forests.
You will extrapolate way unnecessarily. This is part of the game.
Predictions that in a couple of decades Europe will be without forests. But according to recent estimates, there are now more forest areas in Europe than 100 years or 50 years ago. But there is nonetheless, I claim, the prospect of a catastrophe here. Scientific data seem to me at least abundant enough. And we should act in a large-scale collective way. And I also think, this may be critical to some of you, there is a problem with capitalism here for the simple reason that its managers, not because of their evil nature, but that's the logic of capitalism, care to expand self-reproduction, and environmental consequences are simply not part of the game. This is, again, not a moral reproach. And incidentally, so that you will not think that I don't know what I'm talking about, in communist countries, those in power were obsessed with expanded reproduction and were not under public control, so the situation was even worse. So how to act? First, by admitting we are in a deep mess. There is no simple democratic solution here. The idea that people themselves should decide what to do about ecology sounds deep, but it begs an important question, even if their comprehension is not distorted by corporate interests. What qualifies them to pass a judgment in such a delicate matter? Plus, the radical measures advocated by some ecologists can themselves trigger new catastrophes. Let me mention just the idea which is floating around of solar radiation management. The continuous massive dispersal of aerosols into our atmosphere to reflect and absorb sunlight and thus cool the planet. Can we even imagine how the fragile balance of our Earth function and in what unpredictable ways geoengineering can disturb it? In such times of urgency, when we know we have to act but don't know how to act, thinking is needed. Maybe we should turn around a little bit. Marx's famous Thesis 11. In our new century, we should say that maybe in the last century, we tried all too fast to change the world. The time has come to step back and interpret it. The second threat, the commons of internal nature. With new biogenetic technologies, the creation of a new man, in the literal sense of changing human nature, becomes a realist prospect. I mean primarily so-called popularly neural link, the direct link between our brain and digital machines, and then brains among themselves. This, I think, is the true game changer. The digitalization of our brain opens up unheard of new possibilities of control. Directly sharing your experience with your beloved may appear attractive, but what about sharing them with an agency without you even knowing it? Finally, the common space of humanity itself. We live in one and the same world, which is more and more interconnected, but nonetheless deeply divided. So how to react to this? The first and sadly predominant reaction is the one of protective self-enclosure. The world out there is in a mess. Let's protect ourselves by all kinds of walls. It seems that our countries are run relatively well. But is the mess the so-called rogue countries find themselves in not connected to how we interact with them? Take what is perhaps the ultimate rogue state, Congo. Warlords who rule provinces there are always dealing with Western companies, selling them minerals. Where would our computers be without coltan from Congo? And what about foreign interventions in Iraq and Syria, or by our proxies like Saudi Arabia in Yemen? Here, refugees are created. A new world order is emerging, a world of... Can I just finish the page? 2 minutes, literally. A world of peaceful coexistence of civilizations, but in what way does it function? Forced marriages and homophobia are okay, just that they are limited to another country which is otherwise fully included into the world market. This is how refugees, again, are created. The second reaction is global capitalism with a human face. Think about socially responsible corporate figures like Bill Gates or George Soros. They passionately support LGBT, they advocate charities and so on. But even in its extreme form, opening up our borders to the refugees, treating them like one of us, they only provide what in medicine is called a symptomatic treatment. The solution is not for the rich Western countries to receive all immigrants, but somehow to try to change the situation which creates massive waves of immigration.
Thank you. Yeah.
We are complicit in this.
I agree.
Is such a change a utopia? No. The true utopia is that we can survive without such a change. So here I think, I know it's provocative to call this a plea for communism. I do it a little bit to provoke things. But what is needed is nonetheless in all these spheres, I claim, ecology, digital control, unity of the world, capitalist market, which does great things, I admit it, has to be somehow limited, regulated, and so on. Before you say it's a utopia, I will tell you, but just think about in what way global market already functions today. I always thought that neoliberalism is a fake term. If you look closely, you will see that state plays today more important role than ever precisely in the richest capitalist economies.
Keep the state out of my life.
The market is already limited, but
I like both sides. What do I do? I'm a centrist. Oh no.
In spite of protests here and there,
they both have really good
probably
points.
Continue to slide towards some kind of apocalypse, awaiting large catastrophes to awaken us. So I don't accept any cheap optimism. When somebody tries to convince me that in spite of all the problems, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, my instant reply is yes, and it's probably another train coming towards us. Thank you very much.
Oh, look at him wanting to be a comic. Everybody wants to be a jokester. They don't want to do the work to be dumb. They don't want to be the work to be dumb.
Please don't do this, because I really think that that's why I hope you, Jordan, agree with it, that's why we are here engaged in this debate. Don't take it as a cheap competition. It
Thank you.
That. But we are, as you said in your introduction, desperately trying to confront serious problems.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. That's what we need. Stop making everything a competition. Let's collaboration.
I didn't mean to celebrate.
Collaboration, not
That
competition.
worries me terribly. My God, is this our future?
No.
Sorry for this. Sorry, please. Discount, take away this from my 10 minutes.
No problem. No problem. No problem.
Dr. Peterson, 10 minutes to you to reply.
So, I like to speak extemporaneously, but Dr. Zizek's
I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm an idiot. Extemporaneously. Oh, I do that all the time. Look at me. I'm extemporaneous. I'm learning so much about myself.
discussion was so complex that there's no way that I can juggle my responses
Tell me
spontaneously.
about it.
So, okay, yeah, well, and achievement managed, I would say. So I heard much of what I heard. I agreed with, but we can get to that. I'm going to respond.
Pull out the knife.
All right. Well, I heard a criticism of capitalism, but no real support of Marxism. And that's an interesting thing, because for me, the terms of the argument were, well, there were three terms of the argument, let's say. There was capitalism, there was Marxism, and there was happiness. And I would say Dr. Zizek focused probably more on the problems of capitalism and the problems of happiness than on the utility of Marxism. And that actually comes as a surprise to me, because I presumed that much of what I would hear would be a support of something approximating traditional or even a-traditional Marxism, which is why I organized the first part of my talk as an attack against Marxism per se. Okay, so now Zizek points out that there are problems of capitalism. And I would like to say that I'm perfectly aware that there are problems with capitalism. I wasn't defending capitalism, actually, in some sense. I was defending it in comparison to communism, which is not the same thing. Because as Winston Churchill said about democracy, you know, it's the worst form of government there is, except for all the other forms. And so you might say the same thing about capitalism, is that it's the worst form of economic arrangement you could possibly manage, except for every other one that we've ever tried. And I'm dead serious about that. I'm not trying to be flippant. I mean that it isn't obvious to me, when Dr. Zizek is speaking in more apocalyptic terms, it isn't obvious to me that we can solve the problems that confront us. You know, and it's also not a message that I have been purveying that unbridled capitalism per se, as an isolated, what would you say, social economic structure, actually constitutes the proper answer to the problems that confront us. So I haven't made that case in any of the lectures that anything I've written or any of the lectures that I've done, because I don't believe it to be true. He said, well, what's the problems with capitalism? Well, the commodification of cultural life, all life. Fair enough. There's something that isn't exactly right about reducing everything to economic competition. And capitalism certainly pushes in that direction. Advertising culture pushes in that direction. Sales and marketing culture pushes in that direction. And there's reasons for that, and I have a certain amount of admiration for the necessity of advertisers and salesmen and marketers. But that doesn't mean that the transformation of all elements of life into commodities in a capitalist sense is the best way forward. I don't think it is the best way forward. I think the evidence for that's actually quite clear. There is, by the way, a relationship. This is something I didn't point out before. There is a relationship between wealth and happiness. It's quite well defined in the
There's definitely a relationship.
Now, it's not exactly obvious whether the happiness measures are measures of happiness or whether they're measures of the absence of misery. And my sense is, as a psychometrician who's looked at these scales,
I'm
that
living a pretty miserable existence, but I'm happy.
With being happy. Those are all actually
and I'm not disassociating anything.
emotional
I'm just being
states
realistic
mediated by different psychobiological systems.
and trying to do the best that I can in every situation,
It's an important one.
even if it kills me.
There is a relationship
Oh.
between absolute level of income and self-reported lack of misery or happiness. And it's pretty linear until you hit, I would say, something approximating decent working class income. And so what seems to happen is that wealth makes you happy as long as it keeps the bill collectors at bay. Like once you've got to the point where the misery is staved off as much as it can be by the fact that you're not in absolutely economically dire straits, then adding more money to your life has no relationship whatsoever to your well-being. And so it's clear that past a certain minimal point, additional material provision is not sufficient to, let's say, redeem us individually or socially. And it's certainly the case that the radical wealth production that characterizes capitalism might produce a fatal threat to the structure of our social systems and our broader ecosystems. Who knows? I'm not absolutely convinced of that for a variety of reasons. I mean, Zizek pointed out, for example, that there are more forests in Europe now than there were 100 years ago. There's actually more forests in the entire northern hemisphere than there were 100 years ago. And the news on the ecological front is not as dismal as the people who put out the most dismal news would have you think. And there is some possibility. That doesn't mean that there aren't elements of it that are dismal. You know, what we've done to the oceans is definitely something catastrophic, and we definitely have our problems. But it is possible that human ingenuity might solve that. What else? There are inequalities generated by capitalism, a proclivity towards a shallow materialism, the probability of corruption. The thing about that for me is those are catastrophes that are part of the struggle for human existence itself, and not something to be laid at the feet of any given socio-political system, especially one that seems to be producing a fair modicum of wealth for the poorest section of the population and raising people up to the point where, you know, their lives aren't an unending day-to-day struggle for mere survival. There's some evidence, for example, that if you can get GDP up to about $5,000 per person per year, oh, that's GDP, that people start to become concerned about environmental degradation and start to take actions to prevent it. And so there is some possibility that if we're lucky, we can get the bottom billion or 2 billion people in the world, or 3 billion as the population grows, up to the point where they're wealthy enough so they actually start to care enough about the environment.
That's
so
what I'm talking about. Let's do it. Let's act collectively.
Say, well, by that time we'll be out of Earth.
Yeah, probably.
We'll have
if we don't act quick.
The resources that are in front of us so desperately that there's no hope of that. But I would like to remind you of a famous bet between Julian Simon and the biologist at Stanford who wrote, Paul Ehrlich, who wrote The Population Bomb. They bet, Ehrlich, who thought we were going to be overpopulated by the year 2000, bet Simon that by the year 2000, commodity prices would have increased dramatically as a consequence of evidence that we were running out of material resources. They made a famous bet over a 25-year period, and Ehrlich paid off Simon in the year 2000 because commodity prices went down and not up. And so there is no solid evidence that the fact that our population is growing, and will peak out, by the way, at about 9 billion, there's no solid indication that the consequence of that is that we are, in fact, running out of necessary material resources. And so it's a danger, but it's not a danger that's proven. And there is some utility in considering that the addition of several billion more brains to the planet, especially if they were well-nourished brains, as they increasingly are, might help us generate enough problem solvers so that we can stay ahead of the
Sounds like I'm
looming
passing
ecological
gas. It's
catastrophe
hilarious.
as our population balloons outwards. Now we're going to peak at 9 billion. It's not much higher than we are now, and it looks like we might be able to manage it. The other thing is that I didn't hear an alternative really from Dr. Zizek. You know, he admitted that the rise to success of the Chinese was in part a consequence of the allowance of market forces, and decried the authoritarian tendencies, and fair enough, that's exactly it. It also seemed to me that the social justice group identity processes that Dr. Zizek was decrying are, to me, a logical derivation from the oppression narrative that's a fundamental presupposition of Marxism. So there, I never heard a defense of Marxism in that part of his argument as well. And so for me, again, it's to ask what's the alternative. I also heard an argument for egalitarianism, but I heard it defined as equality of opportunity, not as equality of outcome, which I see as a clearly defined Marxist aim. I heard an argument for a modified social distribution of wealth, but that's already part and parcel of most modern free market states, with a wide variation and an appropriate variation of government intervention, all of which constitute their own experiment. We don't know how much social intervention is necessary to flatten the tendency.
Maybe we can get a more organized debate going, guys.
So terribly that only the people at the top have
Still good, still good, still great for philosophy. Thank goodness that philosophy is
profound tendency, much deeper than the tendency.
70,000 views.
And we don't exactly know what to do about it. So we run experiments, and that seems to be working perfectly reasonably.
I'm sure it's more.
As far as I can tell.
People aren't into it yet. They'll get into it once they find their own philosophy.
Let's see.
And it ain't hard, because all it is thinking.
I'll close with this. Capitalism in the free market, well, that's the worst form of social organization possible, as I said, except for all the others. There is a positive relationship between economics measured by income and happiness, or psychological well-being, which might be the absence of misery. I certainly do not believe, and the evidence does not suggest, that material security is sufficient. I do believe, however, that insofar as there is a relationship between happiness and material security, that the free market system has demonstrated itself as the most efficient manner to achieve that, and that was actually the terms of the argument. So thus, if it's capitalism versus Marxism with regards to human happiness, it's still the case that the free market constitutes the clear winner. And maybe capitalism will not solve our problems. I actually don't believe that it will. I've in fact argued that the proper pathway forward is one of individual moral responsibility aimed at the highest good. Something for me that's rooted in our underlying Judeo-Christian tradition that insists that each person is is sovereign in their own right and a locus of ultimate value, which is something that you can accept regardless of your religious presuppositions, and something that you do accept if you participate in a society such as ours. Even the fact that you vote, that you're charged with that responsibility, is an indication that our society is structured such that we presume that each person is a locus of responsibility and decision-making of such import that the very stability of the state depends upon the integrity of their
So few people have integrity, though, Jordan. What do you say to that?
That they adopt as much responsibility as they possibly can.
How do you get people to get motivated to do that? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Which to me is something approximating a balance.
Which is why I'm starting a religion, a reconciliation of the unknown.
Family in keeping with what's good for you as an individual, and then what's good for society in the larger frame, such that it's also good for you and your family. And that's a form of an
just figured it out. That's why you pray like this. You take two to make one. Oh, unity.
Sophisticated way of looking at the ways society could possibly be organized, and I happen to believe that that has to happen at the individual level first, and that's the pathway forward that I see. And so that's my 10-minute commentary.
Great work, Jordan. Jordan versus Zizek.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Dr. Zizek.
I already spent a little bit of my time. I will try to be as short as possible. So a couple of remarks and then my final point. Why I think this self-limitation of capitalism is needed. First, about happiness. Just a couple of remarks. Jordan, I want to ask you, but isn't it, am I dreaming? I think I'm not. I remember a couple of years ago, it was reported all around the world, some kind of investigation, percentage of people interviewed in different countries, do they feel happy with their life? And the shock was that some Scandinavian countries, which we considered social democratic paradise, were very low, while Bangladesh, I think, was close to the top. Now, I know this logic has a limit. I don't buy the bullshit of
he said, pop my collar. I say he's popping his collar. Look here, Jordan. Look here, Jordan. I'm going to tell you about happiness.
My argument here is problematizing happiness even more. Look, this may interest you. I was years ago in I think, Lithuania, and we debated, I report on this in one of my books, when were people in some perverted sense, and this is the critique of the category of happiness for me, happy. And we came to the crazy result. After the Soviet intervention, Czechoslovakia in 1970s and 80s. Why? For happiness, first, you should not have too much democracy, because this brings the burden of responsibility. Happiness means there is another guy out there, you can put all the blame on him. And as the joke went in Czechoslovakia, if there is bad weather, a storm, oh, these communists screwed it up again. That's one condition of happiness. The other condition, much more subtle one, is, and this was done in Czechoslovakia, those dark times after Soviet. The life was relatively, moderately good, but not perfect. Like, there was meat all the time. Maybe once a month there was not meat in the stores. It was very good to remind you how happy you are the other time. Another thing, they had a paradise which should be at a proper distance. West Germany, affluence. It was not too far, but not directly accessible. You know, so it was, so maybe in your critique of communist regimes, I agree with you, you should more focus on something that I experienced of, you know, don't look only at the terror, ultimately totalitarian regime. There was a kind of a silent, perverted pact between at least in this late,
He's not used to wearing clothes, I guess. Because he's a raccoon. He was turned into a human by a witch by a raccoon, I think is what the meme said.
We guarantee you a relatively safe life, employment, private pleasures, private niche, and so on and so on. So I am not surprised. But again, this is not for me the argument for the communists, but against happiness. That, you know, people said when the wall fell down, what a wonder in Poland. My God, in like Solidarność, which was prohibited a year ago, now triumph at the elections. Who could imagine this? Yes, but the true miracle, in a bad sense for me, was 4 years later, democratically ex-communists came back to power. So, you know, again, this is for me not the argument for them, but simply for the, let's call it, corruptive nature of happiness. So my formula, maybe you would agree with it, is, my basic dogma is happiness should be treated as a necessary byproduct.
Thank you.
If you focus on it, you are lost. It comes as a byproduct of you working for a cause and so on. That's the basic thing for me. Second point, maybe we disagree here. China, of course, the miracle, economic miracle was due to unleashing market reform and so on. But, and here comes my pessimism, some of my liberal friends are telling me, yes, imagine what would they have achieved with also political democratization. I'm a pessimist here. No, they found a perfect formula of how, and that's the paradox of China today. The Communist Party is the best manager of capitalism and protector against workers. The truly dangerous thing in China today is not to flirt with Western ideas, is to organize trade unions, to, you know, like this is what worries me. This perfect combination between unleashing capitalism and still the authoritarian rule, or to put it in another way, my worry is that today, all around the world, this eternal marriage between capitalism and democracy is slowly disappearing. Till now, I admit it, capitalism needed from time to time some 10, 20 years of dictatorship. When things started to improve, democracy returned. Chile, South Korea, and so on. I wonder if we are still at that. Now, just very quickly, your basic point in the introduction, in your introduction. You know, I almost am tempted to say, the way you presented Communist Manifesto, the simplified image, and so on and so on, it's crazy to say, but on many points I agree with you, and it's a very complex argument. Marx didn't have, for example, a good theory of how social power exists. His idea was simply, with disappearance of class structure, it's secretly, although he wouldn't have accepted it, a technocratic dream. Like, by experts, social life will be run as a perfect machine. Although he was at least aware of the problem, which is why he was so enthusiastic, Marx, about Paris Commune, you know, which was precisely not centralized power. So I'm not just defending Marx. I'm saying it was not clear to him. And so let's drop that. Maybe I have more interesting things to say. Another point. Nonetheless, at one point I'm ready to claim, where did you find this? This goes maybe for today's politically correct jerks and so on, that this egalitarianism. There is one passage in his late critique of Gotha program where Marx directly accesses the problem of equality. And he dismisses it as a strict bourgeois category. Explicitly. For him, communism is not egalitarianism. It's, yes, hierarchies, but not based on capitalism. Okay, I'm not totally defending here Marx. I'm just saying, don't refer this to Marx. Okay, but to conclude, because, yes, I want to keep my promise to be a little bit shorter. You know, I agree with you on many points, but you know what's my problem with my problem that I was aiming at. With all the openings I know, we don't know really what is happening with ecology and so on. And this is okay, let's take oceans, you mentioned them. But isn't it, for me, correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't mean this rhetorically, maybe I'm really wrong, but the problem of oceans, the only way for me is some kind of cooperated international action and so on. You cannot simply leave it to the market. That's what I'm saying. This is the faithful limit that I see. About this diminishing poverty and so on, I am aware of it. I tend to agree with it. But I at the same time see so many explosive tensions. For example, do you know about South Africa? It's a terrifying situation on the edge of the civil war. To be very brutal, the only thing that, I'm simplifying it, that really happened with end of apartheid is that the old ruling class, I simplify it in grotesque Marxist terms, was joined by a new black ruling class, which is not doing a good job, so they are trying to play the race card. It's still the consequence of white colonialism and so on and so on, but tensions are terrifying. And here I was pleading for not abolishing borders and so on, but this type of, I don't know how to put it, global change, cooperation, like, again, the example of Congo that I...
Collaboration, look at that, yeah, everybody's talking about collaboration, yeah, let's collaborate.
That guy Khashoggi, it's horrible, but the true nightmare is Yemen today. I mean, you said somewhere that we should well think without engaging in large-scale reform, what the consequences will be. Okay, very briefly, I agree with you that the gap of standard Marxism was that the proletarian revolution will be a place where you do something and you know exactly what you do. If there is a lesson of the 20th century, is that this tragic logic, you want something maybe good, the result is catastrophic, holds absolutely also for revolutions and so on and so on. But in spite of all this, and I don't know what forum will it have. I'm not pleading for a new Leninist party or whatever. I'm just pleading for new forums of international cooperation and so on. I agree with you when you said the majority of us is not even really aware of the seriousness of, especially the poor, of ecological problems and so on. And I think, would you agree that the situation is here much more subtle and obscene? It's that logic that in psychoanalysis is called disavowal, Verleugnung. In French, je sais bien, mais quand même. We know ecological problems, but we don't really take them seriously. And here
nobody takes anything seriously.
And I don't see an easy way out. I am a pessimist, if you ask me. When people say, no, but they are growing, protests are growing, and so on and so on. Yes, I'm listening to this story from when I was young, you know. They are growing, and then look what happened. The mega tragedy is, for me, for example, what happened to Syriza. They were elected for change, whatever, and they become, and I'm not blaming them, they become the perfect executors of austerity program. So I just see problems. I'm a pessimist. And I'm not a radical pessimist. But you have to, maybe here we are different. I noticed with your final speech, that final moments of your intervention, that it's very strange, because usually Marxists have this stupid optimist anthropology. Just get rid of capitalist terror and we will all be happy. My God, I'm much more a pessimist. I don't believe in human goodness. I never underestimate evil, never underestimate envy. I mean, it's part of my nature.
People don't know what love can do, because people don't know what love is.
Godlike figure.
That's why you're worried about evil. You're worried about evil, son. You need to get this guy with your...
Whatever you want.
You gotta get this creation magic. Oh, wow!
Farmer answers. Fine,
Creation magic.
You know, we are in this. Don't underestimate this. I don't see any simple, clear way out. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. It's pretty clear, I think, to all of us that you both have quite a bit to say to each other. And so,
And to ourselves.
and so I think before we jump to some audience questions, I thought it would be nice to give each of you a chance to ask a response or ask a question or two from each other. So starting with you, Dr. Peterson.
Maybe you want simply to counterattack. It wasn't fair to...
Well, I've only.
Well, maybe this is all we need to
Right,
do on this.
I had-
Ooh, that's enough. Yeah, I'll watch this by myself, but maybe that'll give you guys an idea of how I use intuitive learning to, you know, figure out what's inside me, I guess. And now I take what I've learned and question everything. So I hope this video helps, and I can't wait to do another one. This was so much fun. Hey, high five. Boom. I have to pretend no one's watching me, 'cause no one's watching me. Get it? It's okay.